Alpine Liquid Fertilizers is your full-season crop fertility specialist from start to finish. Visit alpinepfl.com for more.
It's time to talk autonomy and autonomous vehicles with Nic Dubuc. Nic, how are you?
Very good.
Now, for anyone who was following along earlier this week, yes, there was some large political news out of Ottawa. Let's not ignore that. But there was also a rollout at CES 2025 in Las Vegas from John Deere. And I watched, and probably a lot of people did watch as well, watched the rollout, but also watched your comments on X and wanted to sort of capture some of that here for our radio audience. So first impressions, first blush, what did you think of the rollout from John Deere?
And I thought that was interesting. How Deere is really pushing, broader market than just row crops. There's been a lot of focus initially since 2022 with row crop tractors, autonomy, for tillage and stuff like that. And this time there was a small part at the beginning about row crops, second generation autonomy on the big tractors, but there was a pretty significant focus on specialty crops, which I thought was interesting. And that's kind of what I've been seeing since the beginning of discussions about autonomy, where it makes a lot of sense in specialty crops, but also with construction equipment where they're getting more into it, and even landscaping, so they're really trying, I think, to fit that technology right across their product lineup, but not just big focus on row crops, because I think there is actually a lot of really good opportunities outside of row crops.
So a few things as well, and I really the how it started, how it's going kind of discussion is an important one, right? I mean, you've been to Agritechnica many times over. The focus has been on autonomy, self-driving tractors, etc. But what struck me in this announcement really is it's sort of a move away from this sort of standalone autonomous unit, and really is more about, hey, here's what you can add to existing units to decrease the labor demand, right? So,
I think a lot of it has to do with, it seems like we've been talking about some sort of autonomy since GPS systems came along in the early 2000s. So I get that feeling a little bit like self-driving cars. It's taking way longer than I think people expected, or even manufacturers expected. And they're starting to figure out that it's going to be a step-by-step approach where, a farmer is going to start with maybe one unit, but not every job on the farm can be autonomous. So at one point, CNH had that cabless autonomous tractor they were showing. Well, that's all nice, but only works if everything on the farm that tractor does is autonomous. Now, I don't think they're at that point yet, so they're really trying to find a solution where you can, start with one toe in the water, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll give it a try to autonomy on an existing unit, and then it's, maybe another one and another one, or, you can order factory installed solutions as well. But it's, I think they're seeing more a step-by-step approach, and they're moving away. You're mentioning Agritechnica and some of the dedicated autonomous units. It really seems like a lot of the innovation stuff they were showing back in 2019, that was a big year for innovation, where they were showing ideas and concepts. That is just going nowhere. That kind of disappeared off the map. The best example I can think of is that huge drone that was suspended. We saw it there and then never heard from it again. Right. And it probably moved away from that. So I think as they develop new solutions, as they test them, as they work with farmers, they probably realize some of the opportunities with the new technology and some of the bottlenecks as well. Mm-hmm. And that kind of steers their decisions or their approach. So that's why I'm kind of feeling it's more of a step-by-step approach. Now they're saying, okay, well, we can do bigger tractors, wider implements and planters, but I still think it's going to be very much focused on tillage for now, especially on the row crop side of things, because there is the whole aspect about monitoring the implement you have behind you.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the specialty crop stuff made a lot of sense to me, because some of those applications, spraying in an orchard, there's no ground engagement. It's really driving between rows. The rows don't move from one pass to the other. So I think what we're seeing is, I guess, natural evolution based on their trial and errors and testing and developing technologies.
I'm one for puns. So I will say, it does feel like they're capturing low-hanging fruit here, if you will.
They are.
They are. I mean, but you're right. We're talking about, the orchard applications for the air blast system. I mean, exactly that. You're not trailing an implement per se, right? It's not ground contact. You would hope the trees don't move. And they're quite large objects to be able to potentially use LiDAR and these sorts of things to guide these systems.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, it makes sense. I do find it interesting, though, and for the broadacre application, as you mentioned, sort of focusing on that tillage pass, it's sort of funny. Isn't that how most people learn to drive tractors and implements, is you start everybody on the harrow and you learn on the harrows, and then you eventually graduate to doing other things. So I find it interesting that we're kind of taking the same tack.
It's funny because I was having that discussion with a friend yesterday after the launch and everything, and I was just pointing out really what I'd probably want to put autonomy on first on my farm. That would be like the tractor that pulls the roller after drilling beans, or the tractor that's going to be tedding hay or raking hay, or stuff that's not too complicated. And that was my friend's response was, okay, so basically all the kids' jobs.
Exactly.
And really that you started there, and then you're going to move. You're going to move up the chain to more complex stuff. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of the more difficult applications, even planting to a certain extent, because of all the monitoring. You want to make sure everything's working fine, everything is uniform. But I guess the holy grail of automation is probably harvest. Yeah. And we're far from the point where we won't have anyone sitting in the cab still.
Yeah, exactly. And
but it's nice to see the evolution.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. It is certainly, a step forward. I think you're right. You hit on, one of the key parts here in that, just like with GPS, I mean, you didn't buy a tractor that was GPS. You could add GPS to an existing tractor, right? As you went forward. So same idea that, moving from this concept of a fully autonomous unit that doesn't even have a cab, et cetera, which we recognize a lot of these are concept vehicles, and it's sort of the idea to push it forward. But, realistically, especially, right now in the current aspect of, farmers maybe not looking to spend extra money on equipment, the idea of adding a kit to an existing unit to be able to maybe do your tillage pass or your rolling pass or those sorts of things is I think a much more manageable decision than, investing in a whole fleet of autonomous vehicles.
Exactly. And I'm still curious about the price point of the technology, and even to a certain extent, what will the business model be? Are they going to be selling the hardware and selling a license like they do with current GPS stuff? Or I think some of the Gen 1 units that they were kind of pushing since 2022, probably a very limited release. I think that was on a lease basis. So I'm curious how they're gonna approach this. And really, ultimately, I was thinking yesterday after the launch, what's the upside for the farmer? How do you get your money back from investing in those systems? And ultimately, it comes down to, you look at a tractor on your farm and how many hours you put on that tractor, how many of those hours can be autonomous, and how much you pay your employees. Yeah. And that's going to give you, okay, well, I'm putting a system on a tractor that does 200 hours a year, and I could do most of them autonomously. Well, that's going to be that 200 hours a year multiplied by whatever salary you're paying. So that's where, the specialty crop stuff I thought was interesting, because those tractors usually rake in a lot of hours. Yeah. So it may actually make more sense in some of those places. But, I mean, for there's a whole like labor management aspect that we kind of have to think about, because for a big farm running multiple units, I think it can make sense. But if you're a farm, you have a single planter, and then basically you have Uncle Jim that helps you in the spring on the cultivator, and in the fall on the grain cart, for example, are you going to invest in Autonomy to replace Uncle Jim? Or, it's the dynamic, I think, is going to be very different depending on the farm size and their labor structure.
Mm-hmm. And that, for John Deere basically came out sort of, even their press release, it starts out with this discussion of the labor shortage or a tight labor market for construction and agriculture as well. So definitely the focus there, and exactly that, the numbers. Well, we see that with a lot of things, right? The numbers on high value crops tend to work out a lot quicker than perhaps on wheat, let's say, but still an application. All right, Nic, we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much. Thank you for following along. It has been really neat to see what's going to happen. And I guess we see if this becomes the trend, if we see other companies sort of following suit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see who's next.
Yeah.
Who's moving next. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep track. All right, Nic, thanks so much for joining me here on the show.